Hello there and welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the new digital FPV system from DJI, and in this video I'm going to give you a complete overview of the features and spec of this product, as well as show you through the menu systems, show you what options are available, and hopefully give you as much information as I can on it. To give you an overall spec of this new system, it is capable of transmitting up to 720p video at 120 frames a second, up to 4 kilometers in FCC mode. It also has a minimum latency of down to 28 milliseconds, and that means it is really putting it in the same camp as traditional analog FPV systems, and it's the first time that I've seen a digital FPV system that is capable of really giving the analog a run for its money. The system itself is designed to be used with pretty much any standard flight controller for race applications, and it is tuned to be used with Betaflight, and there are some new features around that as well, which we'll discuss as we go along the components. Because this is an all-in-one FPV system, it is not a flight controller, so there is no NFC. It is not going to replace your flight controller. It is the digital FPV side of things that this gets involved with, and it also has an integrated remote system to allow you to get some benefits from that as well, like changing the settings on your flight controller via the remote, as well as being able to use this with multiple different versions of the ear end as well. So, taking a look at these new goggles closer first of all, here you can see I'm comparing them to the original DJI goggles RE that we had last year, and you can see that they are dramatically smaller. This new system works on 5.8 gigahertz only, and these new goggles are specifically designed to be used with just this ear system. They do not bind to the DJI flight controllers or any of the aircraft, so it means they're not going to work on your Mavic. They are only designed to be used with this new ear receiver. Taking a closer look at these new goggles, they have been entirely redesigned, and they are more like traditional FPV goggles that you see out there. The big headband is gone, and you've now got this strap assembly which goes over your head to hold them in place, with these buckles located on either side. Now, first of all, up front you will notice the 4 antennas, and these are the 5.8 gig antennas designed to pick up the digital FPV signal. Now, these are actually removable, and they simply unscrew if you do want to take them off. They use standard antenna connectors, so you can replace them if you so wish. The system uses 1440 resolution, and it doesn't actually have a built-in battery. They've actually designed it to be used with a standard LiPo, and included with the package, DJI give you a cable which connects into the goggles power socket with a standard XT60 connector on the other side. It's designed to be used with between 2 and 4S, and it also has an AV input. Now, something I want to explain is these new goggles do not have analog. They are only going to work with the digital ear system or the analog AV input. So if you did want to use these with analog, you would have to actually connect an analog receiver up to the AV input. Moving around the goggles, if you look on the top, you have a menu option up here, as well as the back button and the record button, because these goggles are capable of recording on board the goggles themselves, and you're also able to record on the ear unit too. Now, the record button, when you press that, depending on the settings, will either set the goggles to record or the ear end to record, depending on what option you've set. Further around the top, you can see that there are ear vents, and there are actually ones located all over. There's some down the bottom here, and interestingly, there is also some located above the screens here as well. And the reason for that is you can actually feel some airflow moving through the goggles when the fan is running, and it does help prevent fogging on the lenses. Just like the original goggle setup, DJI have used the same sort of lens setup as they had before, with the IPD adjustments located on the bottom that allow you to adjust the position of the lenses to best suit your eyesight. On the back right hand side of the goggles, you have your power socket and your AV input. Now, this power socket is a standard DC jack, and as I've said, the cable they include is just a DC jack to XT60, and that is where you're designed to plug them in. And then below that, you've got the bind button as well. On the left hand side of the goggles you have the channel switches, and this allows you to set what channel the goggles is on, as well as an LED display output. And the idea of this is anyone flying next to you will be able to see what channel the goggles are set to simply by looking on the side of this LED matrix. Now the channel up and down options simply switch between the 1 and 8 channels in FCC or the 1 and 4 channels in CE mode. Now because this is digital, it does have a lot less channels. DJI stay in FCC. Up to 8 sets of these are able to fly with each other at the same time, and in CE you're limited to 4 because of the available frequency bandwidth. Below the controls you can see the micro SD input for recording, as well as the Type-C input for updating the firmware. Now the goggles themselves actually use two 2-inch screens that combine to make a single screen at 1440 by 810. Now this is capable of then receiving the digital signal from the air system at 720p, but there are 2 modes that are available to you. The first is 720p 120 frames a second, which gives you the very low latency. The second option is a HQ mode that actually increases the bitrate in the image to give a slightly better signal, and that is set at 720p 60 frames a second. However, when you're using that, it does increase the latency to at least 40 milliseconds. The goggles will also record that at 720p 120 or 720p 60 depending on what option you set it to, and it will do that in MPEG 4H.264. Because the goggles are capable of playing back video as well, it supports all the usual formats of MPEG 4, MOV and MKV files to be able to play back the footage it records or any other footage as well. Now the goggles also have an adjustable field of view, and it is between 30 and 54 degrees depending on if you adjust the image size from 50 to 100% on the screen. Taking a closer look at the air system now, and this is the bit that sends the HD video back from your aircraft to the goggles. Now this is an all-in-one system with camera and air unit in one. They are hardwired, however the cabling and the camera itself is replaceable, so don't worry if you do damage it, you can swap it out. It is 5.8 gig only, as just like the goggles, and it uses MMCX connections for the antennas, and DJI include these 2 little ones as part of the package. On the front of the unit you have the main connection output, and this is where it will have its power, which is between again 2 and 4S, 7.4 to 17.6. It has the S-Bus RC output as well as the UART input for connecting it to the flight controller. Now with regards to connecting it to your aircraft, you can use this with pretty much any standard race flight controller as long as it supports the MSP UART connection. It is specifically designed to be used with Betaflight, and there are some features around that allow you to change your PIDs, your rate settings directly from inside the goggles when you are using that UART connector. Alongside S-Bus, DJI have also introduced something called DJI HDL, and this is a new faster control link that allows it to send high-speed data to the flight controller for the RC controls, and this allows it to go down as low as 7 milliseconds. Now this new DJI HDL is due to be supported within Betaflight 4.1 onwards, but if you didn't want to use that, you can still use the standard S-Bus. So as I've said, the video unit sends the 720p 120 frames per second video to the goggles. However, it does have an SD card slot on the side, and this means it is also able to record video directly on board, and it can actually do this at 2 different resolutions. It can do this at up to 1080p 60 frames a second, and it also records audio on board as well, and that means this system can replace your filming camera if you're happy to use the 1080p video rather than have something like 4K. Now whilst some people might say the ear unit is quite large, there are some space savings to be made if you're not going to fly it with a separate camera. When you move around to the other side of the ear unit, you then have the USB-C port for updating the firmware. And as I've said, when you flip it upside down, you can actually see that there's a little door here, and this is where you would remove that to be able to disconnect the cable from the camera, and all of that is actually replaceable. Specifically talking about the new camera module with this system, it is a 4 megapixel sensor with a 2.1mm lens. It weighs just 8.2 grams and it has a field of view of 93 degrees vertical and 122 horizontal. The main field of view adjustment though is in the goggles itself, not by the camera. Now because it is paired up to the ear unit itself, it is capable of recording that up to 1080p 60 frames a second, and it does record audio as I mentioned as well, so it means it can replace your main flight camera. Comparing the new ear unit to the original Ocusync ear unit, you can see that it is actually quite a bit smaller. It is a little deeper in height, but it is actually substantially shorter in length compared to the original one. Now, the camera has also been shrunk too, and if you compare them side by side, you can see that they have been able to take quite a bit of size out of it. Overall, they are actually very similar in the way they work. The original one was Ocusync, this one is Ocusync 2. Something I will state though between these ones and the original system, the Ocusync Air system had head tracking built in. The new digital FPV system does not. There is no head tracking in the goggles and there's no head tracking output on the ear end either. So if you are looking at this system to be able to use it with fixed wing, specifically with head tracking, the original Ocusync system is actually a better one to look at because this one has been aimed more at the racing quad territory. Finally, alongside the new goggles, DJI have introduced a remote controller to go with this system. Now, if you've ever flown a DJI Phantom, you'll notice that it is very familiar. However, it has been customized for this new digital FPV system. It is only designed to be used with this and it doesn't work with any other systems out there. Now, it is available in both mode 1 and 2, and the reason for that is it has a standard fixed throttle which is not sprung loaded, so it means depending on your application you might want to choose the hardware that suits you. Now DJI have said you can change it yourself, but they are not recommending it. On this remote control you have the usual power button at the bottom which allows you to turn it on and off with the double press, and they've converted the return to home button to be a standard programmable button for the features of the RC. Something new on this RC that we haven't seen on the DJI ones before is that there are 4 3-position switches. Now these are preset to channels in the RC and it allows you to program these to various features via your flight controller or Betaflight, and it means that you can set your arm in, you can set all of the usual stuff that you would be able to do on a traditional remote. Looking at the rest of the controls, on the top right hand corner you have a back button as well as a dial button, and these are actually used for controlling the menus on the goggles themselves, and they allow you to control the settings, change everything without actually taking your hand off the RC. These are actually mapped within the software and you can change that as well, but it is a nice feature that they've used the existing type controls that are on the RC. Moving on to the other top corner, you then have the record button for again setting it to record on the goggles or the ear unit, and you then have this adjustment knob, and this is pre-mapped to profiles that the camera is capable of doing. They've set up a number of image profiles that allow you to switch between them and change the contrast and things like that to get the best image back depending on the scenario and the sort of conditions that you're flying in. Moving to the back of the remote control, you will notice that there's a big door in the middle, and what DJI have actually done with this is used the same battery as the Crystal Sky and Syndense remote controller. So it's the same nearly 5 amp battery that unclips, and it allows you to swap it out in use, and it means that you can have multiple battery packs available as well. Below this there's also some adjustments for controlling the sticks, and the rest of the adjustments are actually located under the rubber on the side here. So if I do that, flip this out, you can actually see you've got the rest of the stick adjustments located under there, and you can do them, put a small screwdriver down, and then when you're finished the rubber cover just clips back in place because the things go back in the holes like that and covers the screw holes over. Overall it is very similar to the one that's available on the Phantom and Inspire series, but it has been customized and it has pretty much everything you would need on it for most flying applications. The 4 switches give you pretty much most stuff, unless you're used to having 16 or 18 switches on a Taranis, which isn't really that common on a race quad or freestyle flying. You know, it's got everything pretty much covered. The next thing we're going to do is walk through the menu system and have a look at what options are available whilst using this with the goggles and a Betaflight flight controller. Okay, taking a closer look at the OSD and menu. On the main screen, you will see it is set up as follows. On the bottom left-hand side, you have the aircraft signal indicator from the air system, as well as the current system channel selected. Looking at the top sort of right 2/3, you will see the record icon showing you the situation of the SD cards in both the goggles as well as the air system, telling you how much record time you've got left. Moving further down from this, you can see you've got 25 ms, which is the current latency the system is showing, and it does show you this live in flight. And then next to that is the data rate of the digital stream between the air system and the goggles. Moving then along the bottom, you have the voltage, which is currently showing at 0.2 volt because my flight controller doesn't have its battery connected, and next to that you have a flight timer once you arm the motors. And then finally the other option next to that is the 12 volt goggles voltage from the battery pack that I've got connected. When you enter the menu, you can see you have 4 options. We have player, audience, playback, and the main system settings. Player allows you to select the current channel assignment your system is set to. Now, because I'm currently in CE, it's giving me the choice of 1 to 3 plus the public 8 channel. Audience mode allows you to set the channel for any additional viewers as well. And then playback allows you to play back your files that you've already recorded on board the SD card that is in the goggles. And you simply hit play and it will show it on the display. Next, you then have the main settings menu, which gives you the overall settings for the system. The top option is camera, and within this, you then have the ability to change the settings for the screen size, whether it be 4:3 or 16:9 aspect ratio. You've then got scene options, which allow you to change image profiles, and DJI have set 3 up in the system. You've then got all of your usual stuff like EV, saturation, white balance, and on the end, you have the ability to actually rotate the camera 180 degrees. So you don't have to worry about actually mounting it 100% the correct way up. You can swap it within the menus. The next option is the display settings, and this is where you can adjust how the image looks on the goggles screen. You can zoom it in and out to allow you to have a bigger or smaller image, and you then have up, down, left and right options that move the image once you have zoomed it out, so you can put it in a different position of the screen if you wish. You also then have a brightness option on the opposite side as well to again adjust how the image looks on the goggles themselves. Below this you then have preferences, which is low latency or high quality, and this is the mode that either sets it to 720p 120 frames a second or the 720p 60 frames a second HQ mode with the different latency options. Below that you then have the focus mode, and this is that new feature that DJI have introduced that allows it to push all of the bit rate to the center of the image when the image quality begins to degrade in low signal. Next below this is where you set the recording settings, and you have the option of set the record device to either both, just the goggles or the air system, depending on if you've got an SD card. And you can also set the air unit recording format to either 1080p 60 frames a second or 720p 120 frames a second. Then below this, the option of what happens when the SD card gets full. You can either tell it to overwrite or stop recording when full so you don't lose your footage. Next, below this is the remote controller settings, and this jumps into a new screen which gives us 4 options: servo, function mode, stick mode and calibration. Under the servo setup, this gives us the options that are within the settings of the flight controller for the RC. So the channels, for instance, are coming back from the RC via telemetry data. It's not actually a representation of what the RC is doing, it's a representation of the servo data coming back from the flight controller. You also then have all your sub-trim options, your reverse, your throttle, as well as your endpoint adjustments too, to be able to get your settings exactly how you like them. Next to this, we then have the function mode option, and this is where we have the ability to set the custom switches and buttons. But again, you can also set this within Betaflight independently of the menus. So if you just leave the settings as standard, you have them on the separate channels in Betaflight 5, 6, 7 and 8 available for you to program to whatever you want. You can also then change the smart buttons within the controller to allow you to do the other functions, and at the moment they're set to the default options and and the only ones available. You also have a stick mode option, and again this changes it from mode 1 to mode 2, but it doesn't change the hardware, and if you were to swap them round you would still need to hardware swap it as well. Finally, you then have the option to calibrate the remote, which is your 2 sticks, as well as the dial on the left hand side of the RC. The next menu then below the remote is the PID tuning menu. Now this controls the PIDs from within Betaflight that are accessed via the UART connection. So for this to work, you need to have UART working as well. And you have a number of options in here. You have PID profile as well as rate profile, so you can do multiple different ones and set it to different options depending on what one you want to use. You then have the PID settings themselves, so you can scroll down and enter that and have the ability to adjust the PIDs that are directly on your flight controller within the goggles menu. So it means that you can tune it in flight via all the usual options, just like you can directly connecting it up to your laptop or your computer at home. You also have a whole host of other options like Miss PP, the filter options for within the flight controller, as well as set rate profiles and the ability to change the rates themselves directly on the goggles too. You also have other settings like your gyro filters, among other things, available to be changed as well, again all coming through the telemetry data. Below the PIDs, you've then got the AV in option, which activates that external video input so you can connect it to an external receiver if you wish to do it. And you've also there got brightness and saturation options for those as well. Below that is the SD card option to be able to format. So you can either format the one on the goggles or the air unit itself. Then below you have language options, which is currently set to English. And finally, you have the device options. And this is where we set the main air unit settings. Now you have the option to set max power to either 25 milliwatt or 700 milliwatt, and you also have the power limit option. Now this is a setting that stops the receiver overheating and then reduces the output depending on what the temperature is, and it means rather than the unit overheating and shutting down, the power limit kicks in and it will reduce its output, but it prevents that total overheat shutdown in flight. Next, we then have the control protocol, which is normal for S-Bus or then DJI's new HDL, which will be working with Betaflight 4.1 onwards. Now, for most people, you're probably going to be using the DJI S-Bus, which is the normal option, but when HDL is available on pretty much everything, you can change it in there. Finally, below this, you've got the option to reset everything or check out the device info, which shows your current firmware versions as well as serial numbers, etc. And that is a total walkthrough of all the menu options that are currently available on these goggles on version 1.0 firmware, and I would expect to see DJI add some more features in the future as time goes on. Okay, so just to wrap this one up, hopefully the information has been helpful. This new system from DJI is a total redesign really over the original Ocusync system that we had here. Goggles are smaller, air system is smaller, better resolution, much lower latency. Overall, it is a big step in the new direction for digital FPV. In my opinion, from what I've seen so far, it is probably the first digital FPV system that would replace analog almost for everyone. Whilst size is still a factor on any digital system, it is the first one to really get that latency down to a level that is acceptable pretty much for absolutely everyone. Down to 28 milliseconds really does push it into that analog camera territory. I'm going to be doing more videos on this over the next couple of days. I'm going to be showing you setup videos as well as taking you through a few other things as well. I'm also going to publish the menu video separately as well for people. So if you did want to just look at that, that one is available on its own too. Now, there is a link to this new system in the description of this video. If you'd like to support the channel, please do check it out. That's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe and I will do another one again soon. Please do subscribe to the channel and check out all of the other videos we have available. They are also split into playlists to help you easily find the ones that are relevant to you. If you would like to support the channel, please check out the links that are in the description for each video. You will find the links for the products we've been talking about, and it's only by you guys purchasing via these links that allows us to keep making videos and buy products to talk about in the future. Please also check us out and follow us on all of the social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. We're beginning to build these accounts up, and whilst it is early days, I would appreciate it if you would like, share and follow us on these platforms. Finally, please also check out my website, www.madrc.com. Now, this is somewhere that we've been putting some of our blog posts and things like that over the last couple of years. So if you're interested in having a look, please do go check it out. That is it. Please do click that subscribe button. Thank you very much, and I will do another video again soon.